The research station on the edge of Earth's solar system was small, quiet, and isolated. It had been set up years ago to monitor cosmic events and experiment with new technologies. The crew there, a handful of scientists and engineers, had grown used to the silence of deep space. The nearest star was light years away, and the stars beyond were mere pinpricks in the dark void. Life was routine for the crew. That was until a strange signal was picked up on their monitoring systems one quiet evening. It started as a faint pulse, barely detectable among the usual cosmic noise. At first, they dismissed it as an anomaly, a glitch in the equipment. But as hours passed, the signal grew stronger. It wasn't random at all. It was too organized, too deliberate. The signal had a rhythm, like it was trying to communicate something. Dr. Eliza Randall, the lead scientist, was the first to notice it. She spent hours analyzing the pattern. Her curiosity piqued. After running it through the station's systems, she found something she hadn't expected. The signal was coming from deep space, beyond the reaches of any known space exploration missions. This isn't from Earth, she muttered to herself, staring at the data. She immediately called for a meeting. The rest of the team gathered around, confusion spreading across their faces. Eliza, pointing at the display screen, explained that the signal was unlike anything they had encountered. It was coming from a distant galaxy, a place where no human had ever been. Even more alarming, the signal had a series of repeating sequences that looked like encoded messages. Could it be an alien race? Commander Jake Davis asked, his voice low, yet filled with a mix of excitement and fear. Eliza nodded slowly. It's possible. But we need to decode this. We need to find out what they're saying. The team worked tirelessly, their minds racing to understand the cryptic message. The clock ticked away, and by morning, they had cracked part of the code. The message, however, sent a chill down their spines. It was simple, yet horrifying in its implication. The enemy is coming. Prepare yourselves. The words lingered in the air like a bad omen, heavy with meaning. Everyone in the room exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to make of it. Was this a warning or a threat? And why would someone, or something, be reaching out to them? The silence in the room deepened as they pondered these questions. What could it mean? Before they could even discuss their next steps, something unexpected happened. A massive surge of energy cut through the station's systems, knocking out their communications and scrambling their instruments. The lights flickered, and the room shook. The building groaned under the strain. There was no mistaking it. Something powerful had just entered their vicinity. Alert! We're under attack, one of the technicians shouted. Panic set in. The research station was no match for any advanced fleet. They had no weapons, no means of defense. It was a vulnerable outpost, designed only for observation and research. The team scrambled to respond, trying to stabilize the station's systems. But it was already too late. Outside, the vastness of space was pierced by the sound of something massive. An enemy force was upon them. Ships, unlike anything they had seen before, appeared in the skies above the station, their dark silhouettes casting a shadow over the entire complex. Commander Jake Davis had no choice but to make the call. Evacuate. Get to the escape pods. Now. The team rushed toward the nearest escape pods. Eliza was at the rear, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that the signal had been a warning, not just for them, but for something much larger. As she boarded the escape pod, she looked out of the small porthole, seeing the attacking ships close in. In the chaos of the moment, she couldn't help but wonder who had sent the signal, and why now. They had no answers, only questions, and the terrifying realization that they were now being hunted. The escape pods shot off into the cold emptiness of space, carrying the survivors away from the crumbling station. Eliza's mind raced. The attack had been too swift, too organized. These ships weren't just some random marauders. They were part of a larger plan. But who were they? Why target a small research station on the fringe of space? And why had that signal reached them? The journey back to Earth was long, and the silence in the escape pod was deafening. As the pod hurtled toward Earth, the crew members struggled to process the events they had just witnessed. They had escaped, but they knew the real danger had only just begun. The attackers weren't interested in a simple research station. They were after something bigger. And the signal had been just the beginning. Back on Earth, Eliza and her team worked urgently to decode the rest of the message. They were determined to find out what was really happening. Every hour that passed brought new information, but it also raised new questions. It was clear now. The enemy was coming, and Earth was in their sights. But the more they investigated, the more they realized the truth. The signal had been sent not just to warn them, but to wake them up. Humanity had been living in peace for too long, hidden away from the dangers of the galaxy. And now, the universe was about to change. The real question was, would humanity be ready? The signal had been their first warning, but it wouldn't be their last. The war was coming, and with it, the most powerful fleet humanity had ever known. It would be a war that would shake the galaxy to its core. But it was a war humanity had no choice but to fight. And as Eliza stared out at the stars, she knew this. Whatever was out there, they weren't going to take Earth without a fight. As the escape pod slowly descended toward Earth, the silence inside was overwhelming. Eliza and the rest of the crew could only stare out the small porthole, watching as the blue and green orb of their home planet grew larger in the distance. The once familiar sight now felt alien, almost out of reach. The terrifying truth weighed heavily on them. What they had just experienced wasn't a random attack. It was part of something much bigger, and humanity had no idea how deep this danger ran. The journey back to Earth was quiet, as the crew sat deep in thought. There was little communication between them, each person grappling with their own thoughts. Eliza was the first to break the silence. "We need to tell Earth Command everything," she said, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "That signal wasn't just a random anomaly. It's a warning. We have to prepare." Commander Jake Davis, who had been staring out the window in contemplation, nodded grimly. "I agree, but we have no idea what we're dealing with. Who sent that signal? And ho." He stopped, as if he couldn't finish the thought. The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had all felt it. There was something deeply unsettling about the whole situation. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message, a declaration of war. They had narrowly escaped with their lives, but they couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Whatever force was out there, they had a purpose, and Earth was in their sights. As the pod broke through Earth's atmosphere and landed, the crew was met by waiting military personnel. They were immediately escorted to a secure facility, where their data and findings were carefully examined. The first thing that struck Eliza was how quickly the higher-ups acted. It was as if they had been expecting something like this. "We've been monitoring deep space for years," General Parker said, his voice calm but full of authority. "But we didn't expect this. You said the signal came from beyond known space. How do you explain that?" Eliza sat down at the conference table, her mind still racing. "I don't know, sir. The signal was too organized, too deliberate. Whoever sent it knew we would hear it. They knew we were out here." "And that's why they attacked you?" General Parker asked. "We think so," she replied. "The attack wasn't just random. They didn't come after the station for no reason. I think they were looking for something, maybe for us, or for the data we were collecting." The room grew silent as the implications of her words sank in. Earth had always been safe, isolated from the vast threats that roamed the galaxy. But now, everything had changed. A dark force was out there, and they weren't coming for the research station alone. "Is there anything else you can tell us about the enemy?" Commander Davis asked, his voice tight with tension. Eliza hesitated before answering. "We didn't get a good look at the ships before we escaped, but they were unlike anything we've seen. They were fast, heavily armed, and their technology was far beyond ours." General Parker nodded slowly, his face grim. And the signal? Any other messages? Eliza glanced at the rest of the crew. We managed to decode part of it. It said, "The enemy is coming. Prepare yourselves." But there's more. We found something else. Coordinates. A location far out in space. "And you think it's related to the attack?" the general asked. "I do," she said, her voice firm. "I think they're heading toward Earth. They might already be on their way." The room was filled with a tense silence. The weight of Eliza's words hung in the air like a cloud of doom. The military personnel in the room exchanged worried glances. The threat was real, and they had no idea how to stop it. Commander Davis stood up, his face serious. "We need to act quickly. Whatever this enemy is, they're coming for Earth. We don't have time to waste." General Parker nodded. "Agreed. We'll mobilize the fleet and begin preparing defenses. But we'll need more information. Eliza, can you help us track down the source of the signal?" Eliza nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'll do everything I can." The meeting ended, and the crew was dispersed, each member given new tasks to assist in Earth's defense preparations. Eliza's mind, however, was still racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. The signal, the coordinates, the mysterious enemy, it was all connected somehow. But what did they want? And why Earth? As days passed, the news of the attack on the research station spread quickly. People on Earth were beginning to panic, and the military was scrambling to keep control. The tension in the air was palpable, and everyone knew that something huge was coming. But no one could predict how things would unfold. Eliza spent most of her time working with the military's top scientists, trying to decode every detail of the signal. The team was able to narrow down the coordinates and identify a region of space that was previously unexplored by humanity. The more they analyzed, the more it became clear whoever sent that signal, whoever had attacked their station, was preparing for something massive. One day, while working late into the night, Eliza stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden within the signal's frequency was a pattern, a series of numbers that didn't seem to belong. As she ran them through the station's systems, her heart skipped a beat. The numbers were coordinates, specific locations, but they weren't random. They pointed to a location on Earth. The realization hit her like a hammer. The signal hadn't just been a warning. It had been a call to action. The enemy wasn't just heading toward Earth. They were already here. The thought was chilling. Earth had always been safe, isolated from the dangers of the galaxy. But now, it was ground zero for something far worse than anyone could have imagined. And the truth was, humanity hadn't even begun to understand the full scope of the threat they were facing. As Eliza stared at the coordinates on her screen, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The war had already started, and humanity had no idea what they were about to face. The only thing they knew for certain was that the signal had changed everything. The enemy was here, and Earth was in their sights. As the days passed, the tension on Earth grew unbearable. The news was filled with warnings, military updates, and confusion. People whispered about the strange signal, the mysterious enemy, and what might be coming next. The government and military were working overtime to prepare for what was undeniably a threat of galactic proportions. Every major nation had stepped up its defenses, and all military assets were being mobilized. But for Eliza and her team, the most pressing question remained. Who were these invaders, and what did they want from Earth? The coordinates they had discovered pointed to a place on Earth itself, and the implications were terrifying. The signal hadn't just been a warning to prepare. It had been a prelude to something far worse. The enemy was already here, and it wasn't just in the form of distant ships. There was something more insidious at play. Eliza couldn't shake the thought. The government had sent her to work with the best minds in the military, and together, they analyzed every aspect of the signal. But despite their best efforts, nothing could explain the bizarre pattern within the transmission. It was as though the signal had been designed not only to be intercepted, but to create a sense of urgency to destabilize humanity's peace. A few days later, the military called an emergency briefing. Eliza, Commander Jake Davis, and several other top officials filed into a darkened conference room. The air was thick with anticipation. As they took their seats, General Parker stood up at the front, his face tight with worry. "Eliza," General Parker began, turning his attention to her, "we've confirmed something. Something we hoped wasn't true." His voice was heavy, and the atmosphere in the room became even more oppressive. Eliza raised an eyebrow, her mind racing with 100 possibilities. "What have you found?" "We've located the enemy," he said, his voice dropping low. "They're here, right beneath our noses." A shockwave of disbelief rippled through the room. Eliza felt her stomach twist in fear. Beneath their noses. But how? How could an enemy of this magnitude arrive undetected? "Their ships are cloaked," General Parker continued. "They're hiding in plain sight, blending in with our own satellites. The entire fleet is sitting just beyond our atmosphere. We've only just detected their presence, and it's too late to act quickly. They've been here longer than we realized." Eliza felt her pulse quicken. "You mean they're already on Earth? Already? Here?" "They've infiltrated our space," General Parker replied grimly. "We think they've been here for weeks, waiting for the right moment. We've activated every defense system we have, but the ships are almost impossible to detect until they choose to decloak." Eliza's thoughts were a whirlwind. The terror from the research station, the ships that had attacked them, everything made sense now. The invaders weren't just after the station. They had been studying humanity, preparing for the perfect time to strike. And the signal was the first step in their plan. "How many ships are we talking about?" Jake asked, his voice tense. "At least 30, possibly more," General Parker replied. "They're not just any fleet. These ships have advanced technology, far beyond what we have. If they wanted, they could wipe us out in moments." A hush fell over the room. The weight of the situation began to settle on everyone. Earth, humanity's home, was vulnerable. The enemies they were dealing with were no longer just some distant threat. They were here, and the clock was ticking. "Is there any way to stop them?" Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. General Parker hesitated, his face grim. "We're working on it. Our military forces are ready for combat, but we're not sure if it will be enough. These ships are unlike anything we've ever faced. Their technology is far superior to ours. But we're not backing down. Earth's defenses are strong. We'll fight to the last breath." Eliza's heart raced. They were facing something far beyond anything Earth had ever prepared for. The sheer power of this enemy felt overwhelming. But one thing was clear: they couldn't just give up. Humanity would fight. "Have you made contact with any of the other space stations?" Eliza asked, trying to think of any allies Earth could rely on. General Parker shook his head. "The enemy has jammed all communications. We can't reach anyone beyond Earth's orbit right now. If there's anyone else out there who's aware of this, we have no way of knowing." Eliza's mind raced. Earth had always been a peaceful planet, isolated in its corner of the galaxy. It had never been involved in galactic politics or war. And now, without warning, humanity was facing an enemy that had infiltrated their own territory. The questions that filled her thoughts were endless. Why Earth? Why now? "We need more information," Eliza said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and resolve. "We need to understand who we're up against. If we can't figure that out, we'll never win." General Parker nodded slowly. "That's the priority. We'll send out scouts to try to gather intel on the fleet. But it's risky. We don't know what we're dealing with." The room fell silent again. Eliza's thoughts went back to the research station, to the attack, to the way the enemy had moved with such precision. Whoever they were, they knew exactly how to strike. As the meeting adjourned, Eliza left the room with a heavy heart. Earth was facing the unimaginable, and all they could do was prepare for the worst. But she couldn't ignore a nagging feeling deep inside her. The signal, there was something more to it. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message. And somewhere, out there, was the truth. She spent the following days working relentlessly, digging through every scrap of data they had gathered. She knew there had to be something they were missing, something that would give them an edge. The signal was a message, not just to Earth, but to something bigger, something greater. But what? One morning, while going through old satellite images and tracking systems, Eliza came across something strange. Buried beneath the static of Earth's satellites, there was an odd distortion. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but as she zoomed in, her heart skipped a beat. There, hidden among the clutter of human-made debris, was a small object, something that didn't belong. It was not a ship, not an asteroid, and certainly not any piece of debris Earth had launched. It was foreign, and it was moving toward Earth. Her hand shook as she contacted General Parker, her voice urgent. "Sir, I found something. It's not much, but it's a lead. There's an object moving toward Earth, and it doesn't match any of our ships." General Parker's voice was calm, but Eliza could hear the tension in his words. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive," Eliza replied. "We need to investigate this immediately. It could be the key to understanding their intentions." The enemy had come. And now, Eliza was about to uncover the first clue that might just reveal how Earth could survive the war that was about to begin. As Eliza sat in front of her terminal, the eerie glow of the screen illuminated her face, casting long shadows across the darkened room. The object she had discovered was unlike anything Earth had ever seen before. It didn't match any known alien ships, nor did it resemble any of the technological advancements humanity had made in its brief foray into space exploration. Its movements were calculated, precise, and unsettlingly deliberate. It wasn't a ship coming to make contact. It was a harbinger. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for just a moment. She knew the stakes. If she was right, the discovery could be a turning point. But if she was wrong, it could be another mistake, another wasted lead in a desperate scramble to uncover the truth. She couldn't afford that. Not now. The hours dragged by as she scored through every possible resource she could access, piecing together any shred of information that might explain what she was seeing. The object's trajectory suggested it was not merely drifting but heading toward Earth at an alarming speed. It didn't fit the profile of any asteroid or rogue satellite, and its pattern of movement indicated advanced propulsion capabilities far beyond anything Earth had developed. Eliza's eyes were bloodshot from hours of staring at the screen, but she couldn't stop. Every instinct told her that this was the key to understanding what had been happening. The signal, the cloaked ships, the alien presence, all of it was building toward this moment. At last, after what seemed like an eternity, she found something. A small anomaly buried within the data. It was subtle but unmistakable. The object's trajectory wasn't just directed at Earth. It was heading directly for one of the most important military bases on the planet, Area 51. Eliza's pulse quickened. Why would they target that location? It didn't make sense. Area 51 was heavily guarded, with some of the most advanced technology Earth had at its disposal. If the invaders knew about it, it meant they were far more knowledgeable about Earth than anyone had anticipated. They had already infiltrated. They had been watching for far longer than anyone had realized. "Eliza, we need you in the briefing room now." General Parker's voice crackled over the intercom, snapping her from her thoughts. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her jacket and quickly made her way to the military command center. As she entered the room, she was met by the grim faces of General Parker and several high-ranking military officers. There was an urgency in the air that sent a chill down her spine. "Sit down," General Parker ordered, his voice low and serious. "We've received word from our satellite network. The object you found, it's not alone." Eliza's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "The object you spotted is part of a larger formation," Parker continued, pacing in front of the room. "We've detected at least 5 more objects heading in the same direction. They're all on a collision course with Earth, and they're all heading straight for Area 51. Eliza's mind raced. If these objects were part of the enemy fleet, and they were targeting one of the most secure military bases on Earth, the implications were terrifying. Area 51 wasn't just a base. It was a hub of human innovation. And more importantly, it was home to several of Earth's most classified projects. If the invaders were after that, it could only mean one thing. They wanted to cripple Earth's defenses from the inside out. We need to prepare for an attack, Eliza said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. We can't let them take Area 51. If they succeed, it will be a disaster. I agree, General Parker said, his expression darkening. But we don't have the firepower to fight this on our own. Whatever these objects are, they're not something we can deal with using conventional weapons. This is beyond anything Earth has faced before. Eliza clenched her fists, trying to control the rising panic inside her. She had spent her whole life preparing for challenges, for moments like this. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Humanity's survival was at stake. Have we contacted the rest of the world? Eliza asked, though she knew the answer. Are any other nations aware of this? No, Parker replied, shaking his head. The signal jamming has been effective. We've tried to reach out to every major power, but it's impossible to make contact. They've isolated us. A feeling of helplessness washed over Eliza. Earth was alone. They were isolated in a galactic storm, facing an enemy that was already inside their defenses. If they couldn't stop these ships, everything they had worked for, everything they held dear, would be lost. We need to act fast, Eliza said, her voice growing more resolute. We need to get to Area 51 before they do. There might still be a way to prevent this from escalating. Agreed, General Parker said, nodding grimly. But we don't have much time. The objects are less than 48 hours away from impact. General Parker nodded gravely. That's what we're trying to figure out, Eliza. We've managed to get a few more readings from the satellite network, and I'll be honest with you. What we're seeing doesn't add up. The objects are cloaked, but we've noticed patterns that suggest they've been monitoring us for much longer than we thought. Eliza stared at the screen in front of her. Data flowed across it at a dizzying pace. The alien fleet, at least 5 massive ships, was still on course, heading toward Earth. Their cloaking technology was advanced beyond anything the Earth's military had seen, but there were subtle patterns in the way they moved, slight irregularities in their trajectory that indicated intelligence behind them, perhaps even a strategy they were following. We've tried everything to communicate, Parker continued. There's no response. It's clear they don't want to talk. The clock's ticking, and we have no choice but to prepare for the worst. Eliza clenched her fists. The time for diplomacy had passed. If these invaders wouldn't negotiate, then it was up to humanity to fight back. Area 51, Eliza said, her voice low. What's in that base that they want so badly? Parker turned to face her, his expression serious. That's what we need to figure out. The base has been involved in a number of top-secret projects over the years, and it's not just a military facility. There are experiments, advanced technologies, things that the world doesn't know about. And if they're targeting it, that's the key. It's possible they want something there, something we've been working on. Eliza's mind raced. We can't afford to let them get to it. The moment they land, it could be over. Parker met her gaze. Exactly. We're pulling out all the stops, but I need you to get to the base, and fast. The team is ready to move. I'm putting you in charge of leading the operation. You'll be in command of the extraction team. Eliza's pulse quickened. Being put in charge was an honor, but it also carried an enormous responsibility. The fate of humanity could rest on the success of this mission, but she didn't hesitate. This was the moment she had trained for, the time to put everything she had learned to use. If they couldn't stop the invaders here, nothing else would matter. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, determination flooding her words. General Parker gave a sharp nod. Good. We've got a window of opportunity, But it won't last long. Get to the base, find out what they're after, and make sure no one gets to it before we do. You'll be operating in hostile territory, but we're behind you every step of the way." With that, Eliza turned and headed toward the exit. Her mind was already focused on the task ahead, running through the plan over and over in her head. The alien ships might be cloaked, but they were coming. And once they arrived, there would be no turning back. As Eliza and her team moved out, the weight of the mission settled over her like a heavy cloak. The world was watching, and they had no idea what was really happening. The threat from the alien invaders was terrifying, but it was the mystery of Area 51 that gripped her. What could possibly be inside that base that made it a target? She pushed those thoughts aside for the moment. There was no time to waste on questions that had no answers yet. The mission had to come first. They had to move quickly, outmaneuver the enemy, and secure the base. The team was ready. The military had prepared as best as they could, but Eliza knew there was no predicting what they would face once they arrived at Area 51. The unknown stretched out before them, like an abyss that could swallow them whole. As the team boarded their transport, Eliza's eyes flickered to the stars above them. Somewhere out there, the invaders were waiting. Their fleet was closing in, their cloaking technology hiding them from view. But Eliza was certain of one thing. They weren't the only ones with secrets. The people of Earth had their own hidden strengths, their own technologies, and their own will to fight back. She wasn't going to let humanity fall without a fight. "Let's move out," Eliza said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. For Earth. For humanity. And with that, they left the safety of the command center behind, heading into the unknown. The journey to Area 51 felt like an eternity. Every minute stretched out, every passing second a reminder of how little time they had. The silence inside the transport was deafening, each of Eliza's thoughts loud in her mind, battling against the fear of the unknown. As they neared the base, Eliza's heart began to race. She could see the outline of the facility through the windows of the transport, the familiar structures silhouetted against the moonlit sky. But there was no comfort in its familiar shape. There was something different about tonight, something in the air that made it feel as though the world had shifted beneath their feet. The alien ships were out there, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they came for. But Eliza wouldn't let them have it. Not without a fight.